Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Unpaid Interns. I'm Austin Render. It is Monday, July 13th. Happy to be back here on the show. A huge shout out to Tamar Scher, Griffin Gonzalez, Connor Hines for all helping out last week. Had a few things going on. Really appreciate them stepping in, allowing me to take a little bit of time off. And I'm actually now live here on vacation in an undisclosed location here with my family on a vacation, but happy to take some time to talk to some fantastic guests this week. Also, big shout out to all the guests that came on last week that the folks were able to collect over the few days. I know Monday was Courtney Robb and Grayson Radcliffe from IU softball. And then a couple of social media people from the Saints and the Pelicans on Wednesday's episode. And Friday was the great Bart Fox, a producer for ESPN and Big Ten Network. He had some fantastic Indiana anecdotes from his time at Indiana and also his time producing Indiana sporting events. So make sure to go check out those episodes. If you missed any of them, you can catch them anywhere you get your podcasts, Spreaker Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. We are up there on Unpaid Interns. Just check us out. Any of our former episodes all on there. I believe we're up to 23 episodes now. And you can also watch them on our YouTube page. I believe the Monday episode did not make it on the YouTube page. But other than that, everything else is on our IU Sports Media YouTube page. You can look for all the episodes of Unpaid Interns to get to see the beautiful faces of all of our fantastic guests that have joined us over the past few months. But today we have a good lineup. Stefan Krajisnik, I'm going to ask him again to pronounce his last name for me. He is coming on the show his second time, so I guess he's a friend of the pod now. He's going to be joining us to talk all things Indiana athletics with the latest Big Ten announcement that there would be only conference games for all fall sports in the upcoming season, if there are seasons for the fall sports. We'll get to that with Stefan in a little bit. And then John Nolan, he is a media relations director and play-by-play broadcaster for the Fort Wayne TinCaps back in my neck of the woods, former boss of mine. He's going to join and talk about the minor league season being canceled and what he's been up to and how the TinCaps kind of keep moving forward and what the ramifications of the MILB season being canceled, what those ramifications might be for the Fort Wayne TinCaps and for minor league baseball as a whole. So we'll talk with him about that and some more fun, lighthearted things with both of them as well. Two great guests that we're looking forward to. Stefan should be joining us here in just a few moments. But before that, I'll take you through some of the headlines. As sports start to ramp up, we continue to get some more juicier headlines. The Redskins and Indians are both planning to change their name. I know Washington announced that a few weeks ago, probably a week or two ago now, and the Indians followed suit. But the Atlanta Braves announced on Sunday that they would not be changing their name. They will keep it the Atlanta Braves, but they're looking into the tomahawk chop and possibly eradicating that from their stadium. So we'll keep an eye on that for the Braves. May not be a great look if they're going to keep their name, but the Indians and the Redskins are changing. But we'll see what the Braves have and maybe a reasoning behind that. Another big news, the NJCAA, so the junior college, the JUCO football programs, NJCAA expects to move football and all other fall and winter sports to the spring, which is a huge move and something that has been floated around in the NCAA about possibly moving football to the spring. I know Lincoln Riley talked about it, head coach of the Oklahoma Sooners, saying it was certainly feasible. We've heard other people say, no, there's no chance that would work. Something that has certainly been floated around, something that's been talked about, and it'll be interesting to see if the NJCAA pulls this off, if JUCO football turns into a spring sport here for 2020 into 2021. You wonder if the NCAA may follow suit if things do not go to plan for the NCAA in this season. A lot of people starting to move into the bubbles for both the NBA and the WNBA. The NBA, of course, starting here at the end of the month. A really interesting week because It feels like the social justice issues for some of the players have kind of subsided. People are moving into the bubble. But the big thing is complaining about the bubble now. A lot of unhappy campers down there in Orlando with the food being restricted to where they can go, what they can do. You're seeing a lot of people becoming fishermen down there in Orlando. So we'll keep an eye on that. But it is interesting to see the people starting to complain a little bit about the scenario there in the in the bubble. But we'll keep an eye on that. I know Remy Abel, who just advanced in the sideline cancer team, tweeted earlier today that he was sick and tired of hearing millionaire and billionaire NBA players complain about the food in the bubble when there's people just trying to make ends meet outside the bubble, which is true. And that leads me to my last big note of the day. Just happened Sunday night. Maurice Creek hits a game winner for sideline cancer. And full disclosure, we are recording here on Sunday night. So it just happened a few moments before I hopped on here. Maurice Creek, former Indiana Hoosier, hit a game-winning three for his team, which is the 22nd seeded sideline cancer. They knocked off the 2 seed and 4-time champion of the basketball tournament, Overseas Elite. They advanced to the championship on Tuesday night. That was something to get the Indiana Twitter going a little bit, some life in the hashtag IUBB trend, as Remy Abel and Maurice Creek both made big plays down the stretch to help sideline cancer win. They're playing for so much more than $1 million, playing for some of their friends that have passed away due to cancer. And it's a really good cause. And if you need some IUBB in your life, you've got Maurice Creek and Remy Abel battling it out there in I don't actually know where that is, but they're going to be battling it out Tuesday night against the Golden Eagles, Marquette's TBT team in the championship Tuesday night. That's pretty much it for the headlines that we have, and I'm going to bring in the man known as Steph here on his Zoom screen. He is our first guest, and I guess Stefan, if you can hear me, I guess we're going to have to call you a friend of the pod now since you've been on twice. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It's actually a funny thing. I keep forgetting the Bloomington and the Indianapolis people are always Eastern time. So I'm always in Central time. So of course I'm running from the golf course right now. But I was literally on hole 18 and I was like, you know what? When he said 840, that probably meant 740.
Well, thanks for squeezing us in. I appreciate it. I don't mean to catch you off guard by any means.
No, you're fine. It was about time my round ended for today. It was due.
How are you playing?
Well, I honestly didn't play too poorly. I've gotten to the point where I just think the 3-wood is just going to work better than the driver, and we're just going to keep it that way because the 3-wood is good. It's not that 3-wood is just fine. The 3-wood is good. The driver is very average. So we're just gonna ride with the 3-wood, and the driver will, if it has to come out of the bag, it'll come out of the bag.
I've been playing like that for the last few months, so I completely feel you. I just tried to do that in a tournament last week, and it did not go well. But I guess my first question, it's really pressing. How was Hamilton last night? Was that last night you were tweeting about that with John Blau?
Yes. Hamilton was actually pretty incredible. I mean, if you've been alive the past few years, you know that Hamilton's been pretty hyped up in terms of musicals or just theater or performances that you want to watch. And I've been wanting to go for a while, but it's almost impossible to get a ticket, and if you do, it's very expensive. And last year, when I was in the media school summer in London program, I really wanted to go as well. And I mean, maybe if I had booked the tickets a year and ahead, I would have made it. I mean, it's impossible. So when I saw that it was going to be on Disney Plus, I was like, you know what? It's not going to be the full experience, but kind of at this point in the pandemic, knowing that, going to plays and stuff like that is probably not going to happen for a while, as is, like sporting events and other stuff. So if you get the chance to watch the stream of it, I would really, really recommend it. I mean, it's incredible what they were able to put together. It really, like, take your middle school, high school history class and make it 20 times more fun. That's basically what Hamilton is. And it's very informative. I will say it's very informative, but it does it in a very, very fun and entertaining fashion. I mean, it's probably one of the best things I've seen in a while. It's pretty long, so if you've got 3 hours to spare, you should watch it. But if you don't, then I don't know if you'd want to watch it in bits and pieces. You got to kind of watch it all the way through if you want to.
Heck of a move to put that on Disney Plus. I know there's a lot of happy people out there who are not able to go to the play, as you said, and are able to go watch it. Hamilton aside, I guess there is a lot going on in the landscape of Indiana athletics. I mean, I guess we could start with the Big Ten's ruling last week that they're going to go conference only. Let's start with football. What's your general takeaways from that on a football side of things and how it could affect Indiana?
Well, the first thing I initially thought was, and this is kind of looking ahead, but if you are to do bowl games and if you are to try to finish the season the way you normally do in a college football standpoint, it's, do you take that 6 wins and lower it a little bit because you're taking out 3 games? I mean, because the 6, that's a quantitative value. You just got to go out and get 6 wins. It doesn't matter who you face. It doesn't matter, value or I guess level of competition that you play. So for Indiana to get 6 wins, I mean, regardless of how good their season is, I mean, even people that had high expectations for IU this year, to imagine 6 Big Ten wins is a pretty tough battle to get to. So that's kind of the first thing I thought of. But then after that, talking to some people, and I recently had a piece about the volleyball team and how they're going to kind of do Big Ten play. It's going to really help the Big Ten to kind of just focus within itself because you can really control a lot more. And I think the first thing that I saw a lot of people tweet is, what's the difference between Indiana traveling to face or Ball State coming to Indiana to play a game as opposed to Indiana flying out to Rutgers or something like that. And I think the reason the Big Ten is more confident is that because they're more confident in controlling that Rutgers is going to have the proper testing in place. Rutgers is going to do the proper things to be able to face a team like Indiana. And it's not that you don't trust a school like Ball State. I'm sure they can do it. But if you're Big Ten, you can control it more. And I think that's what the most important thing is right now for all these conferences. And, the conferences that haven't done that yet, I think they're going to very soon. And it's just a matter of what you can control and what you can trust the most. And for right now, the Big Ten, I think they know that having the Big Ten network, you can control a lot. You got Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, teams that are really good. And if ESPN wants to show them, they're going to show them. So you don't have to really worry about the money side too much if you're just playing within the Big Ten. And as we recently see, I mean, the biggest issue for IU now with not playing non-conference games is just going to be the legal battle, I guess, with the money you're promising to these smaller schools. So in terms of the football standpoint, I think Indiana will be fine. I think the Big Ten will be fine, and they'll be able to kind of control this Big Ten bubble, I guess. And maybe you could throw in a few extra bye weeks. So, if Indiana's supposed to play Penn State and Indiana has 10 players come back to test positive or something like that, the day before the game, you can say, okay, why don't we use this bye week that we have 2 weeks from now and try to reschedule this game or something like that. I think for the Big Ten, it's just a matter of having control and having a little bit more flexibility within that own Big Ten bubble. And I think that's probably the conclusion that a lot of them within the administration came to.
Do you think they'll change the schedule up at all? Because as of right now, Indiana would have about a month gap in between the Wisconsin and Rutgers or Maryland, one of those two that they play.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess you would have to. I mean, I just don't picture a world where Indiana plays Wisconsin and it has 3 weeks off. I just don't think that's logistically very smart for the Big Ten. And I think we're going to start to see that a little bit. I mean, I don't think they're going to add Big Ten games. I mean, they could expand the schedule to 10, 11 games if you were to just play within the Big Ten. I don't know if they're going to do that. I would doubt it. But I think, like I mentioned, you could maybe add some bye weeks, maybe have Indiana play Wisconsin, move the Penn State game if you want, then have a bye week, then move a game, and then have another bye week after that. So you could maybe, instead of trying to add games or fill those slots, just kind of move around bye weeks, give schools a few more bye weeks where you can, like I said, control that testing and make sure that schools are really on top of it. Or if they're not, or if someone tests positive, you can change it around and have some flexibility with what you're doing.
You mentioned your article with the IndyStar about the volleyball program. You've been following Steve Air in the volleyball program for a couple of years now. How does this impact? We'll specifically look at volleyball because that's what you wrote your story on, but just like the Olympic sports that aren't football and basketball, how does this affect those sports possibly more?
Right. I think one thing that I quote Steve on in that article is that he doesn't think that the Olympic sports are going to start before football does. And I think that's kind of the vibe you're going to get with most of these conferences, is that football is going to lead the way. And if football struggles, then most of these other programs are going to struggle. And I think that kind of makes sense, because if you can't have football, I don't know if you're going to have the money to fund those Olympic sports to play. And going off of that, I think football is going to start probably before anything starts. I know volleyball doesn't really have conference games until after they play non-conference for about a month. So they start in late August, and Big Ten really starts late September. I can't remember how men's soccer does it. I know they have a decent amount of games in the non-conference before you really get going with the conference play. So I think in terms of scheduling, it really won't be too much of an issue in terms of scheduling. Now, in terms of moving around or if these schools are going to play, that's kind of where the question marks mostly remain. And I think within the Big Ten, I know we've seen a lot. I mean, even schools like Stanford have cut a ton of programs already. I think that was it, 11 programs that they cut. I don't think you're going to see too much of that in the Big Ten. At Indiana, I mean, I was looking through it the other day. I don't know what sports they would cut if they were to cut anything. I think the first sports that come to mind are maybe water polo or field hockey, and it doesn't seem like that's really going to happen either. So in terms of having to cut programs, I don't think they're going to have to. But if you don't get football going and if football can't start, I don't think you're going to see much of these Olympic sports. And whether that moves to the spring or not, that might depend from sport to sport. It might be different. I don't know if there's right now been too much of a discussion about football moving to the spring. And if football, again, doesn't move to the spring, I don't know if you can have the other sports, because then you're going to have to rely on basketball as well. So I think the general gist is you see where football goes, and the Olympic sports are going to follow that. And if football doesn't go, you'll be pretty hard-pressed to get those Olympic sports going.
Well, we've got Steve coming on Friday. What was kind of his general? And I'm very excited about that. But what
Yeah,
was
Steve is a great quote always.
What was his general vibe about what's going on right now? Is he trying to stay optimistic? Kind of where's he at with his team and kind of his message right now?
Right, and I mean, you'll see this when he comes on Friday. If you know Steve Beard, you know he's probably like one of the 3 most optimistic people I know, if not number one. I mean, his number one thing is, and it's kind of always been a thing with his program, is there's certain things you just can't control. Mm-hmm. And I think this is definitely one of those things. I mean, he's probably, in these meetings, and he's probably talking to people, but I think at the end of the day, he knows that there's a lot of questions that even he can't answer right now. And if he's going to be optimistic or skepticistic, he's probably going to be optimistic about it. And that's probably the vibe you're going to get from most coaches you talk to. I mean, unless someone's a real Debbie Downer and wants to be negative about everything that's going on. He's very, I will say he's optimistic, but he's very realistic. I mean, Steve is someone that keeps up with a lot of things going on around the world. I know he's on the Big Ten's, the new diversity committee that they started. He's part of that. I mean, he's really involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. He's someone that's, aware that the numbers of coronavirus cases is going up, and that's not very good in terms of hoping to have fall sports. So he knows what's going on, but him and his assistants, his players, are going to be as optimistic as possible. And, talking to him, he said a Big Ten schedule for them is going to be really tough, because the Big Ten is really good when it comes to women's volleyball. But if they're only playing a Big Ten schedule, then so be it. He'd rather take that than not have a season at all. And the number one thing is just going to be safety. He's confident in the way Indiana has been going about things. I mean, I know you would rather have 0 cases, but having only 4 positive cases out of 299 tests is really good compared to what some of these other schools are putting out. And he's confident that those 4 positive cases are being controlled, and that they can continue doing stuff like that, so this doesn't turn into 8 and then 16 and then 32, going from that. So within what IU's doing, what the Big Ten is doing, it's given him and the rest of the volleyball program, probably most of the fall sports, reason to be optimistic, and they're going to be as optimistic as they can be, I guess.
Well, you've led me beautifully into my next question. I was going to ask you about the tests. Obviously, IU comes out, I think middle of last week, and they said another round of tests, 4 positives. It's good for Indiana, but in the grand scheme of things, you see Ohio State shutting down. You see some of those southern schools really struggling. In the grand scheme of things, does it matter, or will it matter, that Indiana's doing so well? Because obviously they can't have a football season by themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that's very tough to predict, and that's kind of the thing that I've kind of just felt like with this whole return to campus stuff is like Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska, Wisconsin. I mean, whatever Big Ten school. I mean, people always bash on Rutgers, but Rutgers too. These are all high-level universities. When you take sports aside, these are like some of the top universities in the world, and they know what they're doing, and they got the right medical professionals on staff. And regardless of what these medical professionals do, coronavirus comes down to what you're doing, yourself, the responsibility you're taking upon yourself. Indiana can put these players in their cohorts, whether it be football, volleyball, whatever it may be. We've seen it with women's basketball and men's basketball as well as they've returned. You put these players in their cohorts, everything can go fine within the IU athletics facility. But if those athletes aren't doing the proper things when it comes to social distancing and wearing a mask and whatever it may be when you're going to the grocery store, if you're, if you're hanging out with friends, at least if you're going to do it, at least do it safely and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't matter what you have on staff. If these athletes don't take it seriously, if the coaches themselves also don't take it seriously, these numbers are just going to continue to spread. And I think, with Ohio State, like you mentioned, like some other universities that are starting to shut down, you shut down for 2 weeks, everyone comes back. Well, if your athletes have been going out and partying for these last 2 weeks, then it doesn't change anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing. That's the thing with, if it can happen in the Big Ten, it can happen anywhere. If it can happen in your household with your mom or your dad going to the grocery store, it can happen at basketball practice too. So you just got to take it upon yourself. And if people don't do that, it's just going to keep continuing to spread. And like you said, Indiana's taking upon themselves to do the right thing. If there's no season, I think at the end of the day, they want to at least be able to say, well, it's not our fault. And I know that's a very, that might not be a very good thing to say. Indiana will never publicly come out and say, well, it's not our fault. But at the end of the day, you can only control what's going on with your athletes and your coaches and your administration. And if other schools don't follow that properly or they don't do the right thing, there's nothing you can do about that. You can't expect Scott Dolson or some of the doctors to go knock on Ohio State's door and say, hey, you need to do this, because Ohio State's just going to close the door right back in the face and be like, don't tell us what to do. So everyone's got to take it upon themselves for their own responsibility. And if schools don't, if athletes and coaches don't personally, then that's where you're going to kind of see. And if fans don't take it seriously, if citizens of America don't take it seriously, we're going to have bigger issues instead of just worrying about whether or not we're going to have fall sports.
Very well put. That was poetic. I think everyone needs to hear that message right now. The people on the beaches here in South Carolina need to hear that as well. This might be above your pay grade. It's certainly above my pay grade.
Most things are.
We probably have the same pay grade right now. If there is a football season, if there are fall sports, what is your best guess to what would happen to people like us, to somebody like you who covers football for the IndyStar and covers some of these smaller sports for the IndyStar? Where are our roles in all of this? What do you kind of see happening to student media?
Oh, man, when it comes to student, I thought you were going to ask me in general about fans and stuff coming to games. I don't think we're going to see that, but that's also above my pay grade. When it comes to student media, it's going to be tough, and it's going to come down to the SIDs and what they want to do. I think when it comes to home games, you'll probably see some home people, like people that cover Indiana will probably get Indiana credentials. It's going to be tough to get an away credential, I should say. Man, it's tough. When you look at, if I were to talk about specifically the IndyStar, and I don't want to speculate too much because this literally isn't a conversation that's been had. But let's say we talk about the IndyStar, and you have me and Zach Osterman who cover IU athletics for the IndyStar, and now you have John Blau who works for the Herald Time, and we all kind of work for this Gannett bubble, if bubble is the word that everyone's going to use for literally everything. I would find it hard to imagine that each of us would get credentialed and be able to have 3 reporters there at the same time. And if you want to talk about the IDS or the Hoosier Network, I know the Hoosier Network does a little bit more where in terms of video, and you guys are probably on the field a little bit more.
Which is going to have to be a hard no, I would imagine.
Right. I would be surprised if you guys got field access.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. If you don't have fans in the stands, I'm just picturing like a reporter with a laptop in like a November football game or an October football game against Penn State, where it's just miserable, like raining or snowing, and like you have to sit out in the stands because there's no more room in the press box. If they wanted to do something like that, I guess they could. The Indiana press box is pretty big in terms of like the suites and the stuff they have. If there's no fans, will the people that own the suites be able to go to the games? I feel like that's a little more hush-hush.
Will they put the media
talks
in the suites?
I wouldn't mind if I could have like the president's suite at the IU.
Take WIUX off the roof and put us inside.
Put you guys in a suite. Yeah, it's going to be tough. It was actually a funny conversation I had while I was interviewing Steve the other day. Steve Aaron, I was asking him, like, do you think there's any chance you guys have fans in Wilkinson Hall? And he was like, probably not. And I was like, well, I'll push you to try to give me at least a credential. He was like, well, maybe I can credential like 1,200 people and they can come be fans on the low key. So if that's the way around for coach, if the best way to get fans is to credential them, then maybe it won't be too hard to get a credential. But no, I wouldn't. It's going to be hard pressed. And I think even if you do get credentialed, I think the press conferences are going to be the IU athletes like in the whatever the locker room is considered next year on Zoom. And, you know, if you are in the press box, you're going to be on your laptop on Zoom. And I just, it's going to be, it's not a matter of IU not wanting to credential people. I think the IU SIDs have usually been pretty good about giving out credentials.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a matter of you like physically cannot have X amount of people in one space at one time. And whether that's it, you're not, you know, immune to COVID just because you work for the Indianapolis Star. And I think that's going to be the harsh case at most schools.
There's a lot of big decisions that we will not be a part of, but certainly will affect our day-to-day lives. Your thoughts on the announcement that we will all have to get COVID tested before we come down to Bloomington? You hoping for the saliva test?
I'll say this. I got the swab test earlier this week.
Oh, okay.
And man, I mean, it hurts. It hurts for two. Here's my expert opinion on getting COVID tested.
Here we go.
It hurts for 2 seconds when the swab is touching your brain almost. It hurts. But they pull it out and you're like, okay, the pain is gone, but my eyes like would not stop watering. And I was like laughing. I was telling the nurse, I was like, it doesn't hurt. And she's like, yeah, like sometimes like, you know, when you're up in the glands and stuff, people will just their eyes will start watering. And I was like, I can't stop. Like, I just can't stop. My eyes can't stop watering. And while I was in there, I was lucky enough to get the antibody test too, which is just a blood draw. And she came in and she was like, what are you more nervous about, the needle in your arm or the swab up your nose? I was like, you can take all the needles you want and stick them wherever you want and draw as much blood as you want. I literally, like, I don't care. That doesn't make me uneasy at all. But once you start sticking swabs up my nose, that's when we got problems. So it was uncomfortable, but I mean, it's going to be interesting. It's tough to get a COVID test. I mean, I've been umpiring the local Dyer Little League. So that's I've been around kids and, you know, kids can be carriers pretty easily. So I was like, you know, after a couple of weeks of umpiring, I was like, I'm going to go get myself tested just, you know, just in case, if I can get, I wasn't symptomatic or everything, but like, if I can get the test, I'll do it. And it takes a while to find some place. And if you do, it takes a while to get in line. So, I mean, if you give students a 10-day window where they got to go get tested, that's going to be nearly impossible. So I'll be interested to see how that works out because I know, I mean, I come from a very, you know, I'm very fortunate to come from an area where I can access testing. Even if it takes me a couple of days, I can go get a test. I know all IU students aren't privileged like that. And it's much harder in certain areas to find that. And I'm sure other states are a lot different in Indiana when it comes to it too. So it's going to be tough. It surprises me that Indiana didn't come out and when they said that, didn't offer something a lot more like, hey, we'll provide the testing for you to make your life easier. I was saying, just knock out the whole tailgating fields. You're not going to use it anyways. Knock out the tailgating fields, get up like 3 massive tents and just pump through cars and get people COVID tested. Like, why not?
They don't want people coming to campus though until they're tested.
Yeah,
but then you get too close to campus before you've had it.
That's fair. But if you stay in your car, maybe.
My thing is
that's the thing. I'm not a doctor. You're not.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm going on a Nick Saban rant right now. Where like I'm not a doctor. I'm just trying to run a football program.
Yeah, my thing is like if you get tested 10 days before, cool. It might be negative that day, but by the time you get to campus, you've probably been to X amount of restaurants or X amount of gas stations or whatever. But
yeah,
that's
10
good
days
to know.
Is a big window.
Yeah, good to know. The swab is not something I'm particularly looking forward to, but I also hate needles, so I think it'll all just be bad.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Enough.
You live a better life when there's no pandemic going on. I think we all do.
I do, yeah. Well, Stefan, thanks so much for joining us. You and Matt Cohen are in special company as 2-time guests, so you and him can party.
That's the world's saddest company right there.
Well, sorry to pull you out of your golf round a little early, but
no, you did me a favor.
Thanks for joining us. Stay safe and healthy. We'll talk soon.
Of course, same to you guys. Look forward to seeing you hopefully in the fall.
All right, see you, Steph.
Take care, man.
All right, that was Stefan from the IndyStar covering IU athletics with Zach Osterman. And we're going to bring in our second guest now. He is media relations and play-by-play broadcaster for the Fort Wayne. Look at that background he's got. Oh, he's ready for this. John Nolan. John, how are you?
Hey, Austin, I'm fine, thanks. I'm an aspiring reoccurring guest, so I wanted to make sure I was giving a strong impression.
Yes, yeah. That's the attitude we need out of our guests here, to be ready to go and to want to come back. That background is really good. Let's kind of talk about the past couple months for you. It's supposed to be a busy time. I'm sure you found other things to fill it with, but it's got to be weird not having baseball. What have you kind of been doing the past couple months?
Right, and I'd like to think that the logo and ballpark behind me has household recognition, but for anyone who's not familiar, the TinCaps are the Class A affiliate of the San Diego Padres in the Midwest League. So, yes, as you and I have chatted before here off camera, back in mid-March, we were preparing for the start of the minor league baseball season, just a few weeks away at that point, and obviously all the dominoes have fallen since. And so for me, this is the first time in about a decade since I was around in your position, where I'm not day-to-day broadcasting baseball games. So definitely a new terrain for me, trying to figure out how to spend a summer. Of course, it's still not a traditional summer by any means, with all the precautions that we're taking.
Yeah, it has been a strange summer. We're just like starving for any sort of sports we can get right now. I've never been into NASCAR or the MLS, but I feel like I'm watching them more than I ever have. I mean, it looks like one of the things you've been doing is your MLB The Show. You've been broadcasting some of those games on Twitter. Kind of walk us through where that idea came from and how that process works.
Yeah, well, going back to March when we found out our season was going to be delayed, and I suppose at that point we were still fairly optimistic that it was just going to be a delayed season rather than what it's become here with a canceled season. So at the time, we were focused on, hey, how do we try to make sure we're bridging the gap here during this wait until we hopefully are doing our thing, having our season, in terms of connecting with our fans. So we were throwing ideas out there. And yeah, this was in March when we had the idea of trying to have the TinCaps play in the MLB The Show PlayStation video game. I'll give ourselves credit here that we did conceive this idea before it started to become more mainstream. Major League Baseball there back around late March, early April, they had that tournament with every single team represented by a player. And then every MLB team, or close to it, if not every team, has been having their own streams on social media. So I guess we were just similar thinking as the big league clubs in that sense. And so, yeah, it was a way for us to, engage with our fans. Now, one thing to point out, though, it would be a lot easier if the show included single A teams in it. In recent years, double A teams and triple A teams have automatically been in the game in terms of having the logo and the uniform and maybe even the ballpark. To be honest, I haven't played the show in recent years. I kind of semi-retired from baseball video gaming when MVP Baseball was wrapped up, that series back around like 2005, 2006, something like that. But in any case, we had a video production intern, so fitting to highlight here on this program.
Yes, the unpaid interns.
Yeah, was being paid. So
he doesn't qualify for the show then.
They're not quite authentic to this show's ethos. But Zach Webb went to college at another school in Indiana that we don't need to highlight here.
No.
A chirping type of program. And so Zach, with no regular video production, intern responsibilities for the most part to have, he actually spent hours doing the tedious work of designing the TinCaps logo, like you see, pretty much to a T, in addition to the team's uniforms. And then we've taken some, poetic license to create like an all-time TinCaps alumni team. And for those who aren't familiar, the franchise's roots go back to 1993. So there have been some pretty significant players over the years, like All-Stars, Torrey Hunter, Jake Peavy, a Cy Young winner, now more present day, the likes of Trey Turner with the Nationals, Fernando Tatis Jr. of the Padres. So, to have a little bit extra fun, we've created a best of. And then for me, I mean, I was all on board with helping to implement this. And now broadcast on a weekly basis, because even if it's obviously not the real thing, it's the only chance that I have here on a weekly basis to throw a headset on and get some level of a rep of calling a game. I mean, I'm putting preparation into it in terms of filling out a scorebook and trying to look up an interesting note or two on players. Definitely not treating it the same as a regular broadcast, in that I know that anyone who's tuned in is, not really invested in the results. Part of it's kind of become a bit of a farce, or depending on your perspective, maybe fun, that with our video production intern, Zach Webb, the team is undefeated. And by the way, Zach now has become an unpaid intern since the season was officially canceled. So he actually really is part of the spirit of this. And so, yeah, Zach's like 86-0 playing on a daily basis now.
Is he playing the games?
So, yeah, he plays the games. That is one thing that's different than anyone who's tuned into, say, a Cubs or White Sox broadcast of this, where they're doing a simulation. Yeah, we have the twist where Zach is actually in one room at the ballpark playing the game, and then we have it rigged. So I'm in our broadcast booth calling it off of a monitor. But, yeah, I'm finding it to be beneficial just from a broadcast technical standpoint. As we're seeing sports start to return, for the most part, broadcasters are now calling events remotely off of monitors. Yep. So I figure, hey, might as well get some kind of experience calling something off of a monitor. And then in addition to that, too, we're also seeing the growth and the profile of esports raise. So yep. I don't know if I can add this to my resume now for calling esports.
Absolutely.
I've also considered it sort of a return to my broadcasting roots, as I think I subconsciously was doing play-by-play of video games, whether it was MVP or Madden, or maybe going back to N64, Kobe Bryant, NBA courtside. I think I was doing play-by-play of those games as I was playing, sitting in a beanbag chair as a little kid. So certainly have that experience too when it comes to calling a video game.
For sure. I think we all do that at some point in time. I mean, have you dusted out the game at all? Are you getting any reps yourself?
In terms of playing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do not have a PS4 myself to play. I probably, I'm glad you bring that up, because I think Zach does have a second controller. And so one of these weeks before we go on air, I should request the chance to
yes, exactly. Give it a go. Unretire. Come out of retirement for one game and see how it goes.
Yeah, now, unfortunately, I probably would embarrass myself in terms of the skill level. But, yeah, I was thinking it would be fun, and maybe now we can try to enhance the broadcast, whether it's miking up Zach as he's playing it, sort of getting a raw reaction from him. Although apparently, I don't know, it's pretty locked in, wired. Bill Belichick, no emotion being shown as he plays. But yeah, I think I would obviously be a little bit more animated if I had the chance to call it while I'm playing.
It's certainly. What's the difference? You've been calling games, obviously we all have, in person, at the game, watching the game with our own eyes. What's the difference? I know this is just a video game, but sitting there and calling a game on a monitor.
Yeah, well, one thing that jumps out, like I said, I'm not treating it with the same level of seriousness. I mean, a minor league baseball game in the first place probably shouldn't be treated with too much seriousness. But, yeah, I'm not making sure to be on top of every pitch, trying to make it interactive. So, actually, I don't think we've really been able to successfully stream on Twitter, but we've been on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch. And so this is something that, to some degree, I would do when calling a game in terms of having social media, probably more so Twitter, up in terms of anything that would be interaction from fans tweeting to the team or to myself as a broadcaster. Though that said, a difference clearly would be in a game, my eyes are focused out on the field, and it would be more so probably between innings or maybe rarely between batters would, have a look at my phone or other screen. Whereas here, I'm trying to, if someone leaves a comment, I'm trying to, make sure they're aware that I saw it and have some fun, maybe, spark a little bit of a lighthearted back and forth conversation. Another thing we've done is we've had past players and coaches as special guests with us on the phone. And so that's been part of the fun of that, besides hearing, their perspective on baseball and life these days. It was just to get their reaction to seeing themselves in the game, and
Yeah.
how authentic they think it looks, or having a little bit of fun as whether or not, while let's say a hitter, we had Padres prospect Blake Hunt on the broadcast recently, and while he was on, the video game version of him came through with an RBI hit. So, he was pleased to see that, versus we had a guy from last year's team named Lee Solomon who flew out to the warning track. And then, he has a good sense of humor, and he bemoaned how that, happened to him more times than he wanted to in real life last year. So yeah, that element, whereas, and maybe broadcasts are evolving. I don't know if you've been watching the tournament TBT. Well, I know I saw you were just celebrating IU alums. Big shot for sideline cancer. And they've had some special guests on, and for the most part, in that case, they've really just focused on the conversation, putting the game to the back burner. It's all relative to, again, sort of the stakes of the game. Here in a video game, I'm really not paying attention much, or at least not interjecting like play by play as to what's going on, versus if you're calling a MLB game on ESPN with the Dodgers and Astros, maybe playoff implications on the line, you have a guess, you probably can't abandon the people are tuned in for that. So they're just trying to weigh things like that. But yeah, in terms of some of the mechanics of calling a game off of a monitor, and a video game for that matter, it is harder to read in baseball, like where the ball is going to travel, how far. And maybe that's from a lack of reps of me playing the show to know exactly, what a home run type contact.
Well, you don't know how well you hit it because you didn't push the button. So you don't know if it was solid timing.
Feeling. Yeah, I don't have that feeling off the bat. But yeah, those would be maybe some of the similarities or differences.
Well, unfortunately, the season that you were supposed to be broadcasting has been canceled. Just came out a couple weeks ago. And I mean, what are your first thoughts when that happened, and maybe some time since then to think about it, and it's just kind of your overall reactions to how everything's come down?
Yeah, well, our owner here in Fort Wayne, he basically saw the writing on the wall for the reality of how this virus and pandemic was playing out. And by about April 20th, really was forthright with our staff here in Fort Wayne in telling us that he thought there was next to no chance of us having a season. So yes, it took that until June 30th for that to become official for minor league baseball. So yeah, I mean, certainly some degree a gut punch to just have sort of like what I personally have known as my way of life in spring and summertime be so affected. And then, some of the real life results of that was that most of our staff, including myself, has been furloughed. So now I can feel the vibes here of being an unpaid professional at this point. And that's been the case for anyone who hasn't been keeping up. Most teams across minor league baseball have had to furlough a good percentage of their employees. If not, unfortunately, we've even seen layoffs across minor league baseball. So it's definitely been sobering to see the impacts on people's real lives. And so, yeah, I'm trying to still kind of appreciate some of the silver linings of being able to have some newfound free time and to spend that more so with family and friends. But definitely a wild experience.
What are some of the ramifications that this could have, not only on this summer, but in the future for minor league clubs, for players, for staff like yourselves? What are some of the future ramifications of this?
Yeah, great question. There's going to be a lot of ripple effects, and I'm not smart enough to be able to really forecast exactly how things will play out. And people can see a shot behind me of the TinCaps home ballpark, Parkview Field in downtown Fort Wayne. I think you can even tell just from this photo that it's a beautiful ballpark in the heart of the city. And so, for context, when I say how the TinCaps have had to furlough, most of the staff, the TinCaps, I'd ballpark it, no pun intended, are probably out of 160 teams in affiliated minor league baseball, probably considered to be in the top 10 to 15 most financially stable, successful organizations. And we're feeling feeling the effects of this already. For those who've seen reporting going back to the fall, Major League Baseball is, I was going to say proposed, but I mean, I think it's just they are planning on eliminating in the range of 40 teams from their affiliations. Luckily in Fort Wayne, we don't have to worry about that, but definitely feel for some communities around the country where they were maybe braced for this being their final season of affiliation, and now they don't even have a chance to host a last game, being aware of the finality of it for them. So now, though, we're hearing from the president of minor league baseball, Pat O'Connor, back on June 30th. He was straightforward in saying that there are some teams that are really going to struggle financially just to make it through this pandemic. We're pending perhaps more assistance from the federal government. I think minor league baseball owners are currently working with legislators in Congress on, not a bill that would be specific to minor league baseball, but minor league baseball would fall under the category, like with some restaurants or other entertainment venues that are most affected by this. So I guess it's fingers crossed for some financial support from the government in terms of loans that could be forgiven to be able to bring employees back and cover other expenses. And so the TinCaps and many teams in minor league baseball are hoping for a bit of a help in that regard. I guess just to talk on other areas, assuming that enough teams do financially survive this. In terms of players, we're seeing now as the summer camps are going, looks like the majority of big league teams included some prospects as part of their camp. To use our affiliate, the Padres, as an example, there were 4 players who were on our roster here in Fort Wayne last year who are in the group of 50-something guys right now in San Diego. But that said, there are other, obviously teams have more than just 4 or so prospects. So there are other, well thought of guys who got, financial investments from the big league clubs with their signing bonuses that now don't have the regular structure. I know teams still are in touch with their players via Zoom and FaceTime and checking in on guys working out and such, but obviously a lot of the onus is on the individual now to make sure that they're doing their work. I feel for some guys who are quote unquote older in minor league baseball who, they're clearly, they just have a window in terms of really when they can make it. So just one example, we had a guy here last year named Ethan Skender. He had previously suffered multiple significant knee injuries, and so he was sidelined for 2.5 or 3 years. And so finally last year he made it back midway through healthy. And you look to a year like this where it was going to be his first year going into spring training and going into the regular season healthy, basically since he was drafted. And he was, he's a guy who maybe feels like he could play his way into prospect status, and now he doesn't have that platform to be able to show himself. So definitely feel for guys in that regard, not to mention financially. Luckily, Major League Baseball teams have been paying their minor league players during this period, but we saw it kind of play out where that was up in the air. Even the Oakland A's initially said they weren't going to pay their players all summer long. Thankfully, they changed that, but so many ramifications. I mean, that could be kind of its own show in itself.
Yeah, I don't want to end on that type of note. I want to talk about the field that's in the picture behind you. I've lived in Fort Wayne my whole life. You've been there for quite a few years now, and so you kind of get the relationship between Fort Wayne and the TinCaps and Parkview Field. What's the best part of that relationship and how the city kind of backs this team?
Yeah, and maybe, you can speak to it even better than I have, since you said you've lived here your whole life. I've been with the team since 2013, so I've certainly seen how the community embraces the team, how someone like yourself was, we're glad to have you as an unpaid intern for a couple of summers ago, and thanks again for the help that you provided.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's just great, the pride that the community here takes in the team and in the ballpark. And part of it is that this ballpark does serve as more than just a baseball stadium. It is a community hub. So even in this stretch in which there haven't been baseball games here like usual, there's been a farmer's market on Saturdays throughout the spring and summer. This past weekend, there were a couple of high school graduations that took place here. I think there's a a group that's organized the prom for high school students that'll be hosting their event here. I'm probably, again, this could be a longer conversation, but the short of it is that the ballpark helped to spur a lot of growth and development around the downtown neighborhood. And so a real renaissance that a lot of people point to the ballpark and the team for really kickstarting. And so that's a big part of the reason why fans have embraced the team, supported the team. And part of it too, as you can attest to, is that there's great front office leadership here that's been around a long time. So there's true continuity in the staff, and then the way that the team gives back to the community and a myriad of charitable efforts. So yeah, it's great. And we definitely, one of the biggest bummers of this coronavirus here in Fort Wayne is that we're used to seeing this ballpark packed in the summer, and for the most part now it sits quietly.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a part of my childhood dating back to the days of the Fort Wayne Wizards and that concrete block of a stadium over there by the
Yeah, yeah, that's part of the story too, how it went from being an average run-of-the-mill minor league franchise to then transitioning to a new part of the city into this brand new ballpark, and things went to another level. And that was thanks to the investments in part made by the ownership group here, Hardball Capital. And so that's why, even though this is certainly a time that causes some level of worry and anxiety in Fort Wayne specifically, we are lucky to have strong ownership that we hope to be able to guide us through this unfathomable time.
Well, John, thanks so much for giving us a little bit of your time here on Unpaid Interns. Best of luck this summer. Hopefully the MLB The Show TinCaps team continues to keep winning. It sounds like they're doing great. But stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks a lot, Austin. A pleasure to be with you here. Glad to see that despite the curveballs that have been thrown at you, you've been able to stay active, and credit to your cohorts here with IU Sports Media as well. And I look forward to the days when you guys will be paid to do this great work. And for that matter, for all of us to be paid again to be covering the sports that we love. So thanks again for having me. I'll cross my fingers that maybe I can become a reoccurring guest.
We'd love to have you again. Thanks again, John. Let's get some baseball going here soon for the sake of all of us. But thanks for joining us.
Sounds good. See ya.
All right. See you, John. All right, that'll wrap things up here from today's edition of the Unpaid Interns. It was a great episode to have John and Stefan on to talk Indiana athletics as well as minor league baseball. Minor league baseball is certainly something that kind of just being brushed under the rug by a lot of people. Just, that season's not going to happen. But as John talked about, there are a ton of ramifications that will be had because of that season being canceled. So that'll wrap things up here. Again, a reminder, you can catch all of our podcasts wherever you want to listen to a podcast. Spreaker Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. Under Unpaid Interns, this will be episode number 24, but you can go back and listen to any of our previous episodes. We've had some great people come on and talk to us throughout all landscapes of sports, from NHL to MLB to horse racing to golf. You name it, we've had them on, and we've got some great guests coming up this week as well. So make sure to check those out. You can also get visuals and video on our IU Sports Media YouTube page. Subscribe to us there, and you can catch all of our episodes normally live. Today's was pre-recorded, but normally we are live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 11 a.m. We'll be back on Wednesday. Tamar Sher joins us. She's got some great guests coming along with her. But for now, for John and Stefan, I'm Austin Render saying so long from today's episode of Unpaid Interns.